My name is Kaja Fidlarska, and I'm a sales support specialist here at Kirkhoff Technologies, which is a managed service provider. And joining me today, we have Isabel Schmidt. She's our VCIO and AVP projects. She works with our clients to create a vision for information technology that meets the organization's objectives. And then she works with our project team to implement that vision. At the end of our presentation, we will have a Q&A section, so feel free to leave any questions that you have in the chat and let us know if we can help somehow. Have a nice webinar.
Thank you, Kaja. All right, so what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be learning about cyber insurance questionnaires and how they can help safeguard how cyber insurance can help safeguard your business against cyber threats. So we're going to start with a little bit of background. We're going to go over the state of ransomware as it exists today. So every year, our partner in security, Sophos Security, they do a state of the industry report. We did a webinar on that last month. We're just going to do a couple of kind of the highlights just for anybody who hasn't had an opportunity to see that. So we are down a little bit from the 2022 and 2023 reporting years. But we're still at a state where 59% of organizations surveyed had a cyber incident in the reporting year. Oh my goodness. All over the place. There we go. So this was a little bit of a change. The largest industries that were hit in 2024 reporting was federal and central governments. State and local governments dropped dramatically to the lowest point. We also saw drops in retail and the education sectors, who were previously very high on this list. Healthcare remained about the same. The good news for many people in our industry and our client base, we saw the most dramatic drop in organizations being ransomed, unless at the less than $10 million mark for the organizations by revenue. But it's still at 47% of organizations under 10 million reported an incident, and that climbs to 50% and then 56% as you kind of start to reach into that small enterprise range. Causes of ransomware remain more or less the same. They're big ones that IT security provides against is the exploited vulnerability and the brute force attack. All of the rest of these compromised credentials, malicious emails, phishing, and downloads, these are all user-based actions, something that somebody inside of an organization did. Somebody opened a malicious email, somebody had their credentials compromised without MFA, somebody fell for a phishing thing or downloaded something they weren't supposed to. So you're going to see that theme throughout the cyber insurance questionnaire. Is there's a bunch about technology, but there's also a lot of stuff about process and people. And you do need to make sure that you're addressing the people side of your IT and information security. So how can cyber insurance help? Well, ransomwares have gotten very, very expensive. It's not uncommon these days for organizations to be hit with well over $1 million in costs related to a cyber incident. And as you can see from this chart here, 82% of organizations, when coming up with ransomware or cyber incident response, had to secure multiple sources of funding. And the really disappointing one for a lot of small businesses is that dark purple section in there. It's the personal finances of an individual inside the organization. This is usually stakeholders, shareholders, or in some cases a very small business without any insurance or any other backup. It's the owner's personal finances that had to cover ransomware recovery in order to save their business. So the effects of this on the cyber insurance industry, of course, insurance costs are going way up, and kind of what this call is about is the insurance requirements are getting a lot more strict. Rejections are becoming more common, where they weren't quite as common previously, and insurance rates just simply reflect the status of the industry. As we noted, the Sophos reports stating that for small businesses under 10 million in revenues under 100 employees, it's not uncommon for ransomware payments and costs to reach $1.5 to $2 million. So if you can imagine being a small business, 6 or 7 million in revenues, to have to deal with an incident that requires $1.5 million in mitigation costs, between lost revenues and downtime and paying ransoms potentially, that can be devastating. And many, many times we see small businesses just simply do not recover and the business closes without proper insurance and protections. So we're going to get into the meat of this organization, or this presentation, the cyber insurance questionnaire. So we've just simply grabbed one, the Great American Insurance Company. This is their Canadian form. They do business in Canada, and there's nothing special about this form. We've just simply chosen one because you can Google it. It's publicly accessible. You can review this form yourself. They've just got it posted on their website. So if you want to go grab a copy, you can do so and follow along. One of the things that's really important about a cyber insurance questionnaire is very often we have clients that just simply email it over to me, or maybe to our support line, and they're just like, hey, can you fill this out and send it back to us? No, we can't. This is a business document that you have to sign off on, that we can help you with it, and we go through it with our clients quite regularly to make sure that they understand what it is that they're being asked and that they're putting in correct information. Go through it with an IT professional, absolutely, but your IT professional cannot do this for you. You have to do it with them. All right, page one is really straightforward. You're going to know all of this information yourself, perhaps outside of that one contact information there, the CISO or IT contact. That's your security officer inside your organization if you're large enough to have one. It's your IT manager or IT guy, so to speak, if that's all you've got. If you've got a third party, it could be someone like Kirkhoff Technologies that you could put down in there. Quite often, this is a new one for this year. We are seeing insurance companies reach back out to the technical contact with a more technically oriented person on their team to get clarifying information. The rest of the information there, you know about your business, you know what your revenues are, etc., and what you're doing business as. So let's get into the technical side of things. Estimated volume of protected information you process and store. I like this question a lot better than it has been in previous years. Quite often, this will actually take the form of how many records do you have? And organizations, they really don't have a very good way of measuring exactly like how many records they have. Like you've got records in your ERP system, you've got records in your file stores, you've got records in your filing cabinet. By asking them about the volume, it's a much easier process to go through. You can just simply look at your HR folder on your shared network drive or your SharePoint and say, I've got 18 gigabytes of data there. I've got an ERP system that I've got protected information in. My database in my ERP is 16 gigabytes as well. So therefore, that's how much data I've got. So that's it's a much more straightforward way to identify what your protected data is. And how long do you store protected information for? So many times there's going to be a legal requirement, maybe for tax purposes or something like that. You have to store for 5 years or 7 years or something like that. But you should have a process in place for not keeping data longer than it's legally required for. We see this quite often in organizations. They save customer data or they save employee information because it's their data. They want to have it. But you know what? If you had an employee that left you 10 years ago, there's probably not any good reason to be maintaining their social insurance number inside of your data. You can keep their employee records. Were they good for the job? That kind of information, but keeping the personally identifiable information that's protected under one of these regulations that we're going to talk about next, you don't need to do that, and you should have a policy in place in your organization for purging that information. And then, of course, what controls do you have to protect confidential and sensitive information? Network segmentation is really straightforward. That can be something like physical networks or VLANs, virtual networks. It can be file shares with protected credentials, making sure that your HR folder is not just accessible to everybody in the company, for example. That's your privileged access management. Only privileged accounts can access this privileged information. Physical access controls. This is around, is there a lock on your filing cabinet in the HR and payroll room? Do you have policies in place that say you're not allowed to put personal information on a USB stick that could be lost? Do you have encryption policies in place that say if you do have to put information on a portable device, is it encrypted? Do you have policies that prevent, in data loss prevention, systems that prevent people, say from HR, from emailing information like a social insurance number over the internet in an unencrypted way? Data loss prevention software built into products like Microsoft 365 are capable of protecting your organization against accidental data leaking. Compliance, you should know if you're in an industry that has compliance regulations, whether that be healthcare or in the case of like payment card processing, the PCI compliance. Every organization in Canada is subject to privacy laws that require you to protect private information. And a lot of organizations, they're like, oh, well, we don't process any private information. We don't do healthcare or anything like that. If you've got employees, you've got personally identifiable information that is protected under laws in British Columbia and many other provinces, and federally, if not otherwise by a provincial act. You do have private information and it does need to be protected. Do you have a privacy policy in place on your website? Everybody should. It's very often now a legal requirement of many jurisdictions. And it is great if that is actually a policy that can be backed up legally, that can help protect you. And making sure that you're following the policies if you do have it in place. Security frameworks are something we're starting to see a lot more organizations kind of going in that direction. So NIST is a very common one to do, as is the SOC certifications. There's a Canadian cyber certification that is geared towards many small businesses. We're working through that ourselves this year, and many of our colleagues are as well. And that's a cyber certification from the Government of Canada for small business. And then, of course, if you do align with a framework, when was that assessed? So this next section we're getting into is dealing a little bit with what we talked about as far as policies and controls in place to prevent cyber incidences from taking place through fraud. And so this can be a business email compromise. This can be like a CEO fraud or a CFO fraud, executive fraud, however you want to call it. Basically, in these kinds of frauds, an attacker will send a malicious email or something like that, or make a malicious phone call to an organization asking them to update funds transfer requests, update banking information, that sort of thing. If you don't have policies in place to do something like call back that individual from a known good number, have multiple people signing off on large transfers, etc., then you need to get those policies in place, because insurance companies really holding back on that kind of thing. And it's very important to do. I mean, the largest that we've personally seen that organizations have contacted us was over $350,000 that was lost in a fraudulent email transfer. There was an organization a few years ago where they completed a merger in a fraudulent email, and it was literally hundreds of millions of dollars because an attacker got them to change banking information at the last minute. So have policies in place around those people. And more on the people side of things, getting confirmation of employee security awareness training. And how often do you do it? Now, this is not the IT person in your organization sending out an email that says, hey, everybody, be careful about spam or something. This is organized actual training and testing processes through a reputable third party or software program that you might run internally. And this actually goes through the process of testing employees. Do they fall for a fake email? Do they do an action? And whether they do that action or not, do they go through training? And do you have it documented inside of that training system that you have done phishing testing and training against all of your staff members? And then, of course, who's responsible for that? Did you hire a third party like Kirkhoff Technologies to do that training for you, or did you do it in-house? Endpoints. So this is explicitly talking about PCs, laptops, smartphones, tablets. They say etc. They don't actually say servers on here, which they probably include in that EC, but we're going to include servers in here. Are they password protected or passcode protected? That's a really straightforward one. Do you have to enter a password to log into your computer? All of your stuff, do you utilize encryption on it? So this is another one of those things that can help prevent accidental data leaking and a privacy incident for your organization. So you've got a person in HR or payroll, and they've got a company laptop. If that laptop gets lost or stolen, can an attacker just simply take that hard drive out of their laptop, load it into another machine, and access the information that was on it? Ideally, no, because you've got operating system level encryption enabled through BitLocker or File Vault, depending on your platform. Running a traditional and next generation firewall on your perimeter network, on your endpoints, etc. Many organizations rely on turning off firewalls on their endpoints. That's a very legacy attitude to have towards IT security, and you should be enabling firewalls. And do you have a next generation antivirus on all of your products and endpoints as well? So these next sections, these are all kind of working together. So endpoint detection and response is if your antivirus goes off or if your EDR system detects a problem, does it automatically respond, or is there a response that takes place? So for example, you might have an EDR that says your Sophos antivirus needs to be in tip-top shape, and as soon as it's not, it activates an emergency firewall and locks that machine out from the network or something like that. So that's endpoint detection and response. Managed detection and response is the next level above that. Rather than just simply a response like isolation taking place, a managed provider like Sophos MDR will actually be a physical person, an IT security expert, 24/7, 365, sitting there ready to go to battle, so to speak, with an attacker who's actively attempting to compromise your network. These are incredibly important for organizations to have these services in place in this day and age. And then the security information and event management. So if you've got EDR or MDR, you've probably got this. Your MDR provider is going to be running this as well. You could run it inside your organization as well if you wanted to. It's not a bad idea, but if you've got a security stack through a vendor like Sophos, you'll have a Sophos firewall, you'll have Sophos antivirus, perhaps Sophos switches and Wi-Fi. All of that information is being fed into Sophos's information management system, and that's how their engineers are able to do their work in that managed detection and response service. It is absolutely a next level of security, and it puts a 24/7 SOC security operations center in your environment. It's a huge amount of protection, and many insurance providers are now requiring it. So this is a more technical one, of course. General patches, are they public? Are they pushed out to all devices within 30 days? And are critical patches patched within 14 days? I would hope everybody can check off the yes to this. If you're not doing patch management, either internally or through a third party like KTI, you definitely need to be. And then are 0-day vulnerabilities monitored and responded to within 5 days or less? This is another one that is incredibly important to be able to manage. We worked with an organization that came to us last year where they had a vulnerability in their firewall. Yeah, they were patching their Windows servers, they were pushing out Windows updates to all of their endpoints, but nobody was taking a look at their firewall, and there was a zero-day vulnerability in the VPN service of their firewall that let an attacker just simply port right in. That vulnerability had existed for quite some time when an attacker took advantage of it and compromised their system. Are you using any end of life or end of support software? We always hope no. Some organizations, they keep it going. If you do have software and services that are no longer supported by a vendor, please do make sure that they're segregated from the network. And this is something that insurance companies have really started asking is, why do you still have this and when will it be retired? If you are running on an ERP system on server 2008 and you've got no plan, you need to get one or you're not getting insurance. That is a huge red flag for an insurance company. And it's a huge liability and risk for you as a business. Point 22, standard policy frameworks, domain-based message authentication and reporting, compliance, domain key identification mail. Are these things in place? So these are some things, they're part of the world's email systems these days. So these prevent spoofing attacks and things like that. So if I stood up a mail server in my home and I sent Kaya an email from kirchhofftech.ca domain, these frameworks and these policies in place would raise red flags, and Kaya's email server would reject that message because my home is not authorized to send email from kirchhofftech.ca. So having this kind of stuff in place, it really helps lock down on things like those business email compromises or fraudulent-based attacks where you're spoofing or trying to do what's called social engineering against a staff member. And then email filtering and tool in place to detect and block spam. If you're in Microsoft 365 or probably in Google Workplace or anything like that, there is standard spam and malicious link scanning and things like that. Malicious link scanning and attachments is kind of it's a tier above what is the most basic of Microsoft 365. So if you're not subscribing to a product from Microsoft that includes that, you really should be. And are emails from outside of your organization tagged or otherwise marked for identification? So this is really important. So our domain name, for example, is kirchhofftech.ca. If some attacker was to go out and take out the domain name kirchhofftechnologies.ca and set up an email address, isabel@kirchhofftechnologies.ca, and send an email to Kaya, does that email get flagged as not actually being a valid email from our organization? It can help your end users, again, identify when a fraudulent attack might be trying to be taking place. And then is point 25 and 26 is multi-factor authentication required for email access. This is hugely important. You've got to have this in place. It single-handedly stops the overwhelming majority of business email compromise attacks. If you wind up with a user that has their credentials for their Microsoft account phished from them through like a phishing attack or something like that, MFA alerts the user as to what just happened, as well as preventing that attacker who's just acquired their credentials from being able to use those credentials. Multi-factor authentication on all things is hugely important. Point 27 is multi-factor authentication required to remotely connect to your network, critical infrastructure or facing systems, or privileged accounts. This is another one that's absolutely huge. You can't, in this day and age, have something like remote desktop or even a VPN out there publicly facing in the world without having multi-factor authentication on it. So yes, have those protections, have an RDP gateway, have a VPN, that sort of thing. It has to have multi-factor authentication on it. our firewalls configured according to the principle of least privilege? The principle of least privilege means you can't do something that you're not explicitly required to do for what you need to do. So, for example, a lot of attackers, they might install something that reaches out to a command and control server. Is that data going to, or is that connection going to be blocked by your firewall? And then are you reviewing those alerts and rules regularly to make sure that they're staying up to date? And then when did the applicant last have your network scanned for vulnerabilities through a third party? This is something that we recommend organizations do at least on an annual basis, where you're doing an external vulnerability scan against your network and just generally having it assessed by a third party. Are trackers and web beacons or pixels used on your website? Many organizations do this in order to collect information about who's visiting their website for sales and marketing perspectives. If you do this, do make sure that it's compliant with the privacy laws inside of your jurisdiction. And do make sure that you're not collecting more information than you need in order to do the marketing and sales process that your website is there for. Backing up mission critical systems and data. Everybody should be doing this every day, every hour of every day. Frequently, how frequently do you back it up? I hope that's every day or night. And then where do you keep those backups? Locally, on network drives locally? Do you have an offsite location? Do you have tapes or rotating disks, perhaps that get taken home or put in a vault? Or a safe, or do you have cloud backups? So we like to make sure that organizations are following kind of like a 3-2-1 data protection policy, which is like 3 copies of your data on 2 different mediums, one of which is offsite or offline. Cloud counts, of course, as the offsite. Insurance companies love to see great due diligence and backup management as well. Backups do need to be encrypted to prevent against accidental data loss. You do need to have multi-factor authentication. They do need to be air-gapped or disconnected from your network. And of course, store your credentials and everything in a safe place. Immutable backups prevents the accidental or deliberate deletion of backups from the applications, etc., in the event that an attacker gains access to your backup systems. Do you have business continuity planning, incident response plans, or disaster recovery plans? Many organizations, they have what they consider a disaster recovery plan. They haven't gotten into an incident response plan, which is how do you actually run your disaster recovery plan? Great, you've got backups. You know your backups work because as for point 35 and 36, you test them on a monthly basis. But who's going to actually do that? How is it going to take place? That's what the incident response plan works out. It's how you implement the disaster recovery plan. Those 2 things together, along with other things like how you keep your business alive, is called business continuity planning. And that's where we would love everybody get to. If there was, and this is not just a security incident, this could be any incident that knocks out your business, related to technology or not. If your building burns down, that's great that you've got tested backups. Where are you going to put those backups? Your business continuity plan will outline that and identify how you stay in business in the case of a disaster. Test them regularly. Test your restore plans regularly. And you should know what your recovery time objective is in hours. So this is part of your business continuity plan. When it gets put into place and your IR plans start, how long until you're back up and running inside of your minimum viable product? Ideally, a matter of hours. If you can start serving your customers within hours of an incident, that's where you want to be. And do you have a formal process for evaluating the security posture of your vendors? Everybody should. It's great to ask questions of organizations like Kirchhoff Technologies, how we solve all of these problems. And an organization should always be happy to sit down and talk with you about that. And then, of course, these next ones, they're just more about, you know, your online policies, your online protections, what prevents somebody inside of your organization from posting something illegal on your company Facebook, etc. And then this next information, 40 through 42, that should be information that you know inside your organization, whether or not you've had previous incidents in privacy, network security, cybercrime, etc. So that in a nutshell, I mean, we only have 30 minutes and we're 1 minute over, but that in a nutshell is going through one of these forms. They are getting more complicated, they are getting more technical, and they're asking more and more questions about people. So why work with Kirkhoff Technologies on this kind of stuff? Well, our customers love us. Here's a wonderful quote from Scott Gallardi, the executive director of a great local nonprofit, Ruth and Naomi's Mission. We recently sat down for an interview with them. It's available on our YouTube. It's great to talk with them about the impacts of information technology inside of a nonprofit and charity. If you don't know what to do with your cyber insurance, don't hesitate to book a discovery call with us. I'm happy to sit down with anybody for 30 minutes and talk about where you're at and where you need to get to. Do we have any questions?
Oh, we don't have any questions. If you want to spend a minute on a question that we often get, we can do that. But we don't have any questions in the chat. So people often ask, do you see a lot of people getting rejected? And why would that be?
We're seeing that happening a lot more often. Some of those, it used to be if you said no or yes to some of those things that you should or shouldn't be doing, your insurance rates would just simply be higher. We are seeing more often than not now, the biggest red flags that are in there are leading to flat out rejections and insurance not being issued if you're not doing things like phish testing your users or training your staff. People is a big portion of it, and things like that are seeing rejections now.
Thank you so much.
All right, so our next month's webinar is going to be all about more 365, saving money using the tools that are included with your Microsoft 365 subscription. Many organizations, they subscribe to additional products and services that Microsoft has a tool for that's included in your bundle. So this is just going to be explaining how, you know, you don't need to be using Dropbox or when you have SharePoint, and you don't need to be using Calendly when you have Microsoft bookings. And these are products that are included in your subscriptions, and we're going to go through them in more detail to make sure that you're able to use everything and get the value for your money. If you have any questions about anything related to this webinar or anything else, don't hesitate, reach out. You can give us a phone call, send us an email, book a discovery call directly on our website. You can follow our company page on LinkedIn. We post regularly newsletters and other information that's helpful to small businesses in their IT. And I love connecting with clients, staff, colleagues, etc. Don't hesitate, just reach out to me directly. I would love to connect. All right, thank you for this webinar again, and we will see you next month.
Thank you.